In what may be a turning point in Africa's shifting political climate, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was reportedly spotted wiping away tears during a closed-door meeting at the African Union Summit. The emotional moment came in response to an unprecedented and blistering criticism delivered by Burkina Faso's transitional president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a rising figure among Africa's new generation of unapologetic anti-imperialist leaders. The charged exchange ignited fierce debate across the continent, provoking both admiration and outrage among political elites and grassroots activists. It cast a harsh spotlight on the widening ideological and generational divide between Africa's aging liberation leaders and the younger revolutionary voices demanding a more radical path forward. The confrontation unfolded during a closely watched AU session focused on strengthening Pan-African unity and asserting Africa's sovereignty in an emerging multipolar world. As discussions shifted to economic dependence, democratic backsliding, and foreign military presence on African soil, it became clear that tensions were building. Then, breaking through the usual diplomatic niceties, Captain Traore took the floor. In a fiery speech marked by conviction and passion, the 36-year-old leader issued a no-holds-barred condemnation of what he described as the betrayal of revolutionary ideals by self-proclaimed elder statesmen. Although he avoided naming individuals at first, his tone left little doubt that he was targeting leaders like President Ramaphosa. Mr. President, Traore said directly to Ramaphosa, the ANC was once a beacon of Africa's resistance and hope. But now South Africa sends abroad not freedom, but silence. You were supposed to take up the mantle of Mandela and Biko. Instead, you have become guardians of Western interests. Africa does not need managers for the West, Africa needs liberators. Gasps filled the hall. The room fell heavy with tension as delegates exchanged stunned glances. The gravity of his words hovered over the summit like a gathering storm. Witnesses later reported that President Ramaphosa appeared visibly moved, not shaken by aggression, but by the starkness of the moment. As Traore's critique echoed through the chamber, Ramaphosa lowered his gaze, pulled out a handkerchief, and quietly dabbed tears from his eyes. Although brief and silent, the moment quickly spread through off-record accounts, sparking widespread conversation across Africa. For many, it was a moment of profound awakening. Ramaphosa, once celebrated as a hero of the anti-apartheid struggle and an architect of South Africa's peaceful democratic transition, now faces accusations of overseeing a nation plagued by political stagnation, deepening inequality, and growing disillusionment. Traore, by contrast, has become a symbol of the restless African youth, a generation frustrated by slow democratization and angered by persistent foreign interference. Since taking power in 2022 through a popular military-backed uprising, he has expelled French troops from Burkina Faso, taken steps toward nationalizing key mineral resources, and aligned his nation with revolutionary movements across the Sahel. Critics label him authoritarian and populist, but his supporters see him as a necessary corrective to decades of complacency and elite capture. Traore is the voice of the disillusioned, said Professor Amin Diop of the University of Dar es Salaam. He may not be a polished diplomat, but he expresses the urgency and anger that many Africans, especially the youth, feel toward Pan-Africanist leaders who compromise with exploiters. For decades, the African National Congress, ANC, served as the moral compass of Africa's liberation movements, shaped by icons such as Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Steve Biko. Today, however, many view it as a shadow of its former self, weakened by corruption, internal conflict, and a lack of vision. Ramaphosa entered office in 2018 promising reform, vowing to clean up the ANC, revive South Africa's economy, and restore faith in public institutions. But optimism has faded as unemployment, inequality, power shortages, and persistent corruption continue to erode trust. Critics argue he is overly cautious, consensus-driven, and constrained by powerful interests. The contrast between Ramaphosa's measured diplomacy and Traore's fiery radicalism has come to symbolize a broader question: what kind of leadership does Africa need in the 21st century? The issue is not merely policy, it is vision. Will African nations continue balancing between old colonial powers and emerging global players like China and Russia? Or will they finally define an authentically independent political and economic trajectory? The fallout from the AU confrontation was swift. African media and social networks erupted with discussion. Supporters praised Traore as a truth-teller, pushing hashtags like #Africizing and #NoMorePuppets. In South Africa, calls for the ANC to engage in serious introspection intensified. Journalist Thabo Macon wrote, "What happened at the AU was not just an embarrassment for Ramaphosa. It was the symbolic collapse of the ANC's untouchable myth. Struggle credentials are no longer enough. People want results and courage." While the South African presidency released a statement calling the summit productive and urging continental unity, it did not address the confrontation. Behind closed doors, however, insiders say ANC leaders are rattled and that Ramaphosa privately acknowledged the legitimacy of some of Traore's criticisms. Whether this moment sparks real transformation remains uncertain. But one thing is clear, Africa is entering a new political era, one shaped not by the ghosts of history, but by the demands of the present and the aspirations of a rising generation. And as the dust settles from the AU summit, one image endures, a seasoned president quietly wiping away tears as a young revolutionary dares to speak the truth.